Now let's see about various input elements in the HTML and how you can assign state to them and how you can control them using the React state. So we'll be using React hooks from now onwards. So everything will be functional components. And yeah, so let me start my application. I'm starting with the basic hello world. So the development server has started and it is the hello world, right? So what are the different input elements we have in the HTML on a global note, right? So what we use very frequently, we use input tag, which is of type text, number mainly, right? To take the text input and the number input, and we have text area, which is for like collecting large amounts of data, large text, right? Then we have select tag, which is multiple choice type, right? Then we have input tag file. So basically input tag file is only a read only, right? Because you select the file and that's it. So it's uncontrolled component only. So by default there is no control component for it because it doesn't actually make sense, right? Then we have select input, then we have input type. What else do we have? Input type. Then we have input type checkbox, right? Checkbox to check it, right? So we'll see how we can assign each of these and how do you define a form in React, right? It's not a really big deal to define a form. So let me start doing that. Div. So I'm just creating a div and I'll assign the style so that it is in the viewport. So max width, I'll put it as 720p and margin as auto. Okay, so that it comes in the middle. And now form. So the basic form tag, right? And inside the form we'll have different input elements. Okay, so input first type will be text. Okay, so if you see now in the UI, right? So we got one input element. So let me give some label to it, right? So label. So you can use all the HTML tags basically. Label, name. Okay, so let me put it as first name, right? And now if I see first name, right? So for the form as well, I'll give some name, user details form. So user details form, right? So user details form, let me put it in the hashtag so that it looks bit bigger and bold, h2, right? So user details form, right? So first name, last name, so I'll put each of them in the div just to bring them in one line. So first name, and then we have label last name. Okay, so label last name. So we'll see how do you assign state first, and type equal to text. Okay, and it is going to be last name, right? So if you now see first name and last name, right? So how do you do? First, you define a state variable. So how do you define a state variable using React hook? So constant first name, comma, set first name is equal to use state. That's it. So use state, what is the initial value? The initial value can be empty string, right? Now, how do you bind this input field to this variable? It means now you have to give the control of this input field to the React library. So first step is you define the state variable, and second step is you attach it. So using the value attribute on the input element. So value first name. So now what happens is this input field will always take the value of this first name. Now if you go here in the form and let me give some input, default input value Vasudev. Okay, so see, now that value is injected by the React library. Okay, so this is a state value, state variable, right? Now if you try to change it, so see, I cannot delete it and I cannot modify it or I cannot do anything, right? So you can hear my keyboard and I cannot do anything. This is because you have taken the value from the state variable, but you are not taking the input fields on change event. So if you are not listening to the on change event and updating your state variable, that is first name, then how can you modify the value, right? So for that you need to attach on change event handler. Okay, on change event handler. And what does this do? This on change event handler, if you remember, every input field will have the target value, right? So it means when the event is emitted from this input field, there is an event object which is received on every event listener. So using this event object, what you can do is set first name e.target.value. So this is where e.target is this input field and e.target.value is the value which you are entering, right? So now if you go back and look into this input field, so see, now I can modify this Vasudev. So what have we done, right? So let me add a console over here. Let me add a console over here, console.log, first name changed. Okay, first name changed, and I'll set it in the below line. I'll just print the e.target.value. Okay, so if I now go to my UI and open the console, right? See, whenever there is a change in the input field, whenever there is a change, see, I'm entering V A S. Look at this part, U D E P. So whenever the input field is changed, it emits a on change event, and you are capturing that event and updating the state value. So set first name. So you should define each, you should attach each input field to each state variable so that it is totally under the control of the React library. Similarly, you can do the same thing over here, constant last name, set last name, right? Use state. So my last name, right? And now how do you assign? You simply do value is equal to the last name, and on change you assign a event handler, that is inline arrow function set last name to e.target.value. So this is how you deal with the input field of type text. Okay, now let me add another section. Let me add another section which says label age. Okay, label age. Now I will do the input field of type number. Okay, of type number, and even on this you will assign the same on change event handler, but before that you need a state variable for it, constant age, and set age. Use state which will be a number, and my age is 100. Okay, so I want to live for 100 years, so I'm mentioning it as 100. So first, whenever you define an input field, you create an input field, you assign the value, that is age, and on change is equal to inline arrow function set age to e dot target dot value, e dot target dot value, right? So e dot target dot value. Now you have this age. Now you can change this 23, 30. You cannot put it as the text. I am trying to type some text. It is not accepting because it is of type input number. So this is how you attach to any input fields, right? Now let me add the tag text area. So is it any different? No. So other important about me, right? So in this we'll use a different input tag, that is text area, right? And the text area is going to be something of this sort. So again, you will decide a new input field, new state variable, that is about me, and set about me is equal to use state empty description, right? So label text area, and here value is equal to about me, and on change is equal to inline function, that is set about me, and you receive the value e dot target dot value, right? So that's it. Now as I keep typing, hey, I'm Vasudev, right? So based on whatever you are storing, right, based on whatever your input fields or how many number of input fields you are having, you are defining that many number of state variables. Okay, so what is the other input tag which we have to discuss? The select input tag, right? So let me put the select input tag with a gender. Gender is the one which is perfect, right? So label gender. So how do you define select tag? Select, right? Select, and inside select you will be having options. So what are the different options? Male, and option female, and option other. Usual options, right? So select male, female, and other, right? So if you see now, this form contains a select input field, right? So pretty much same as what we do in the HTML. But now how do you bind this select? How do you bind this select with the React state? Let's see. It's a bit different from how you do on the input field. Okay, it's a bit different, right? So first thing, every select will have a displayable text and a value, right? So value is equal to male. For this, value is equal to female, and for this, value is equal to other. So when you select this option, the value which needs to be filled inside the form is male, small male. When you select female, the value should be female. Now how do you connect this to the React state? First, let me define a state variable, that is gender, and then you can do set gender, right? Set gender is equal to use state, and gender can be male, right? So you can do this. You can by default pass the male gender so that it will be selected. And how do you attach this now to the React state? First, you will pass the value to the select tag, not the option tag. You will pass the value to the select tag, and this is gender. Okay, and you attach the event handler on the select tag. So now you will be seeing, you will be attaching a inline arrow function and set gender, right? Again, same e.target.value. So let me console.log what is being passed, right? Console.log e.target.value select option changed. Okay, so whenever you are changing the select option, an event is fired. So whenever you are changing the select option, an event is fired. So see, select whenever you change the option, female select option changed. Again you change it, other. Again you change it, other. So in the select tag, where do you put the on change event listener and the value? It is on the select tag, but not on the options. The options which we are putting, the value attribute which is on the option actually gives, and we extract that value, and that is received in the e.target.value. If I now here say it is 0 and it is 1 and it is -1, so see what will happen, right? So technically you are seeing the display values as male, female and other, but the value will be 1 and the value will be -1 and the value will be 0. So these are the values which you want to send when the form is being submitted. Okay, that is one thing which you need to keep in mind, right? So yeah, and what else, what tag do we have to keep? Last tag is checkbox, so which is a boolean, right? So we can use the label terms and conditions. So input type is equal to checkbox, right? Input type is equal to checkbox, and value, again what do? You create a state variable. You create a state variable that is checked, set checked. Okay, whatever variable name you want to give it as, use state, and by default I am setting it as true. Okay, I'll change it accordingly. First I want to show you how it will reflect this. What is that? Check. So you pass the value check, and on change you are attaching an event listener, and you are collecting the e.target.value, and you are setting the set checked property e.target.value, and here terms and conditions, right? So see, now I got a checkbox. Okay, I got a checkbox. If you see, whenever I click the checkbox, it is selected, and whenever I click, so if you console.log what is being passed as the target value, that is important, right? What is being passed as the target value? Is it capital true, or is it small true, or is it, what is the casing, right? So is it 0 or 1? It depends on the browsers. Basically it might be 0 or 1 in the Safari. So it is a good practice to see or understand what is the e.target value in the checkbox, right? So now if I go here and look at the console, right? So it is coming as true, right? And when I passed the value true, it didn't come by default clicked. Okay, so if I see clicked is true, even when I am disabling it, it is going as true only, right? So what is the mistake over here? So in the checkbox, I see whenever I console.log, both in the checked phase and in the unchecked phase, it is coming as true only, right? So Is it a mistake? No. So this is how the checkbox behaves in the React. Okay. So what you need to do is you should not consider the value e.target.value, but if you see there is other property on the same checkbox, that is checked. Okay. So when I console.log this, now see what will happen, right? So see, now it is true. When I'm changing it, when I'm unclicking it, the value of e.target.checked has changed, but the value of e.target.value is always true, right? So this is how you not consider the value of target.checked. So basically, for managing the state of checkbox, what do you need to consider is it's not the value, it is checked. Okay, it is based on the checked, and also you will consider the value e.target.checked. Okay, e.target.checked. Okay, now if I go back, right now if I go back and refresh my page, so see, okay, I removed the console.log. Let me put the console.log. Console.log value that is checked. Let's see what is the value of checked, and e.target.checked. Okay, so if you see now, the value of checked is before it was false, now it is true, now true, now false. So now it is working as expected, right? So in case of type checkbox, you remember that you should consider the value e.target.checked but not e.target.value. Please remember about this, right? So this is one thing which deviates from the normal behavior, and so I think you should keep this in mind, otherwise you will be wasting a lot of time in debugging an issue which is not actually an issue. So yeah, so in terms of checkbox, you need to consider the value e.target.checked. Okay, so these are the different types of input fields. Now let me add another button. So basically input field of type file is by default an uncontrolled component, so you don't have to store this data in a state variable because that is a read-only value. You cannot change it, right? As other input fields, you cannot change this file data. It is just a read-only value. So it doesn't really matter if this is a controlled component or an uncontrolled component. But what you need to consider is you need a submit button right now in this form, right? Submit button. And if you want to explore other types of data, other types of input fields like date of birth, let me put my let me put a calendar type of input type, right? So input type is equal to, it can be, type can be, oh god, type can be date, checkbox, color, date, time, local, email, file, hidden, image, month, number, anything, search, submit, text, URL. So if I put date, right, if I put date, then I can label it as date of birth or birthday, DOB, right? So if I put date of DOB, now I'll get a small calendar which is supported by my browser. So how do you consider this value and store it in your state? Constant. So first you define a variable DOB and then set DOB is equal to useState. By default it is an empty, right? By default it is an empty, and you will bind it to the state. So this dot DOB, and then on change is equal to event handler set DOB set DOB. But let's see what is the value which is being emitted out from the target event object, right? So console.log e.target.value, and this is DOB, and I am setting e.set DOB as e.target.value. Okay, so if you now go to the UI, and I change the date, so see it is coming the date as YYYMMDD format, YYYMMDD, and it is being stored as string. It is being stored as string in the state variable. So you can explore all of these input fields, but the concept is same. You bind the value and you attach the event handler. So that way the component or the element or the input field gets in total control of the React, and they behave as the input controlled components. Okay, so let me add a type submit. Okay, so input, and the type is submit. Okay, input type is submit. So you got the submit button. Now when I click on the submit, what will happen? So if I click on the submit, what will happen? Let's see. I'm filling all the details and then submit. So the page is reloaded and something happened, right? So what happened? Let's see. So when you submit a form, what happens is by default, React submits the form to this URL. So if you open the network tab, right, and you click on the submit button, you see there is a network happening. There is a network call which is happening. So see, this is where the network call is happening. Okay, so you need to avoid this. So this is a thing in React.js which is by default happening, and you have to prevent it, right? So let me show you. Clear submit, right? So localhost. So this is creating a get request. You are creating a get request, and it is calling the same URL with a question mark appended at the end, right? So you need to stop this. So first, what is happening? And when you click on the submit button, right? So you need to attach a onSubmit event handler on the form. onSubmit event handler on the form, and you define a function which handles that, right? Handle submit, and when the button is clicked, submit button is clicked, something is happening, right? So if you see console.log form is submitted, right? So now if you go to the console.log and see you saw that, right? The submit form is submitted. So if you see, let me stop it over here. Let me put it debugger. Yes. So when I click, oh god, alert hello. Okay, so I'm putting a alert message. So see, now I have stopped the actual reload. So see, form is submitted. So it means this function is getting called because when you click on the submit button, a onSubmit event is being fired from the form, and this callback function is being called, which is the event listener of the onSubmit. But what is happening is by default in React, what happens is when a submit event fires on the form, you need to stop the default behavior, that is making a get call to itself. So it is the internal implementation of React, and to avoid that, what you have to do is, so as I said, whenever you are attaching an event listener like this, you have the event object with you, and you have to stop the e.prevent default. There is a function called as e.prevent default. Now when you do this, the default behavior, so this should be the first step whenever you are attaching, this should be the first step whenever you are attaching the on submit event handler. So e dot prevent default. Now if you see, when I click on the submit button, the page is not getting reloaded, right? Sorry, the page is not getting reloaded. Let me refresh the page, right? Right. So the page won't be getting reloaded. So it is simple, on submit. So this is one of the things which you need to remember. So in React, whenever you click on the submit button, there is a default behavior that is calling itself, making a get request to the same URL appending question mark. So to stop that behavior, which is forcing the web page to reload, you have to call with a function on the event object, that is e dot prevent default. Then whatever action you want to do. So if you want to submit the form to some backend data, you can do that, right? So this is all about forms, but you might be little annoyed. You might be little annoyed to define all of these variables, right? Or else you can think in the other way, can I do all of these actions with a single state variable by storing all the form data inside an object and handling all of these actions in a single set function, right? So let me do that. We can pretty much do that, right? So it is very easy actually. It also enhances your understanding of the JavaScript a bit more, right? So now what I will do is I'll define a state variable which is called as form data, and I'll also specifically mention user form data, and I'll define I'll have second argument as set form data, right? Now it is used state, the object is empty. So now instead of having each form element in a separate field, I have done is I have defined a state variable which is an empty object, and now I'll supply or store all the form information in this object, so that when I have to submit, I can, instead of reading all of these variables individually, I can read the single form variable, that is user form data. That way, if you have multiple forms in your web page, you can easily handle them, like assign each object to one form. So all of those goes in one variable, right? So let me clear out all of these, right? And modify my code so that it is part of user form data. Okay. So now what do I do? First, inside the object, first name, which will be an empty string. Okay. Last name. So whatever input fields you are dealing with, you put all of those in the object. Initialize the variable with the default state in this manner, and age is 100, and age is 100, and what is the other variable? dob is an empty string, and next we have about me, which is also an empty string, right? And we have checked to false. Okay, we have checked to false, right? So yeah, now what I'll do is now I'll change the way I'm assigning my or binding my input field to the form React state. So how can I do that? User form data dot first name, and similarly user form data dot last name, and user form data dot age. Oh, we didn't define the gender. Gender is male by default, right? So gender, user form data dot gender, and user form data dot dob, and user form data dot about me, and the last one, user form data dot checked. Okay. Now what about this on change event handler? Now since everything is in one variable, the way you handle the on change event handler of all the input field can be brought down to one function, right? So let me show you the magic. Constant handle input field change. Okay, so I'm writing only one function. Right? And this function is going to give me two arguments, that is e object and the type object. Okay, so now I'll modify my code intelligently. See, please pay close attention to this, right? So I am attaching all the input fields to only one handle change function like this. Okay, handle input field change. Now where is this event getting fired from? It is getting fired from the first name text field. So I'll call the handle input field change with e argument and first name. That way in the handle input field I will come to know, okay, based on the type, what key I have to update. Similarly, now let me change everything to this fashion, right? So instead of first name, I'll do the last name, and instead of first name, again here age and DOB, right? So make sure you are passing the same keys which are in the object, so that will be very easier for us later on, right? Or else also it is fine, you have to put a lot of conditions, that's it. Here handle input field, but here it is gender, right? And DOB, and here it is about me, handle input field change e dot about me, and the last one is right, and the last one is checked. Okay, so that's it. Now all the input fields are actually binded to only one function, and now we have to implement this function logic in such a way that it handles all of the input fields, right? So how can I do that? Simple. So first I'll show you the long way, then I'll show you the short way, right? So first the long way. If type is equal to first name, then what do I do? Set form data. So as you remember, I'll recall one important point about the React hooks, which is the second function, set form data, right? In this set form data, if you are passing only like this, first name to e dot target dot value, what will happen is it will overwrite all the state properties, and finally after this step you will have only one key in the object, that is first name. So to avoid that, what do we need to do? User form data. So we are spreading the user form data and only replacing the first name key with the latest value. So this way you will add all the conditions. Else if type is equal to last name, so here you will do set form data, now it is last name, right? Similarly you will do it for rest all keys, last name, age, and we have gender, except for the checked, rest all are pretty much same, right? So I'll show you the short way for it, you will be awestruck with it. Gender DOB, right? Gender DOB. So I'll show you the short form of it. The code looks pretty awesome, and I think that will be very, very good to see for the eyes as well. About me, yeah, we are missing about me, and else. So the last one is DOB, about me, gender, age, first name, last name. So the last else condition is checked. So for this, what do we do? Set form data, and here we know it is checked. So what we do? Checked is equal to e dot target dot checked. In case of checkbox, we don't consider e.target.value, but we consider e.target.checked, right? So this is our handle input field. Handle input field change. It has become so large. I'll show you the short form. Don't worry. But right now what we have done is, instead of maintaining the state of each input field separately, what we have done is we have maintained it in a single object. We have maintained it in a single object, and now each input field is calling only one function, that is handle input field change. And when it is calling that input field change, we are passing the type, what is the type or from where the event is getting fired, and based on that type we are updating the data. So if you see in the handle submit, I'll just try to console.log user form data, right? So if you now go and see, right, first name Vasudev Paloju 100, male, date of birth is going to be 21, right? So there is some problem. Okay, I think there is some problem. The specified value does not exist. Let's see, we did some mistake. It's fine. We are human. We do make mistakes. DOB, yeah. So in case of about me also, we are updating the value of DOB. That's why it is shouting like anything. It is shouting like anything. So let's update about me only when the about me event is firing, right? So, and hey, I am Vasudev from Code Sapiens, right? And terms of conditions checked. And now when I submit, I got the entire form data. Vasudev, about me, age checked is equal to true, date of birth, gender, male, and we didn't miss anything, right? So this way you can store all the form details in one page or one object, right? But the only problem right now here is this function has become very dirty. So you are having a lot of if else and else if conditions, so which I don't prefer it, right? So what I can do is simple. So I'll delete all of this, right? I'll delete all of this and I'll write a very simple thing, that is, if type is equal to checked, if type is equal to checked, then I'll do set form data dot user form data, and checked is equal to e.target.checked. Okay, but in rest all cases, what I'll do is see the magic of JavaScript, right? User form data type e.target.value. That's it. So I am using a new way, right? So what is this? So let me show you what is happening first, and I'll explain what I have done, right? So again, I'll refresh the page, and if you see Vasudev Paloju, age, male, and see, you're not getting any errors. So everything is getting stored in the state object only, but the function line number of lines in the code has been drastically reduced, right? So see submit. Now also I got the same object, right? I have almost reduced like 25 to 30 lines of code, right? So let me explain that to you. So when I do this type of operator in the object, so what it happens is it dynamically reads the type value. What is the type value in different cases? First name, last name, and age, DOB, gender, about me, right? So what it does technically, when the type is first name, this will become like this, target.value, and when the type is last name, it will become last name. So it reads the value, basically. So for this to function, what is the one thing which you need to make sure? The key value and the argument which you are passing should be same. Then you can achieve this pretty easily. So that's the wrap up for the entire React forms. So how do you manage the React forms? And now whenever the input change is happening, you can add validations also over here based on what type of field it is. So validate input field, validate etc. So like this, validate first name, you can define a function, and when the type is first name, you can call this. So if type is equal to first name, then you can call this, otherwise do nothing. Right? So if type is equal to this, if type is equal to this, then you can call a function validate first name before setting in the form data. So if that is validated, then only you can set the form data. Now everything is placed in one, and we wrote a very decent code, the amount of lines which we have written and everything, right? So this is how you deal with React forms, and it is very advantageous by maintaining the state or by defining the controlled components. And one thing which you need to remember is that whenever a form is on submit form is triggered, then you need to do this e.prevent default. Otherwise, React by default calls makes a get request to the same web page, which you have to avoid. And the checkbox actually gives its value in the e.target.checked, but not e.target.value. So these are the two observations which you have made by learning React forms. I hope you remember. And yes, that's a wrap up for React forms.